Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd, and it's time for a review of the new Agalloch record, The Serpent and the Spear. Sphere! Agalloch is a Portland metal outfit. This is their 5th full-length LP, and they are known specifically for their pretty distinct blend of black metal, folk music, dark folk, neo-folk, which is incredibly melodic, dynamic. Agalloch actually is not a bad band to check out if you're new to black metal and you're looking for something to kind of ease you into the sound with a lot of melody, a lot of beautiful, seductive, mystical guitar leads. I recommend records like The Mantle, and especially Agalloch's 4th full-length LP, Marrow of the Spirit, dropped in 2010, was one of my favorite records of that year and was my favorite metal record of that year. And it's been almost 4 years since the release of this album. And in the meantime, there hasn't really been any major lineup changes. They're on the same label. Nothing has really led into this album other than an EP that the band dropped in 2012 called Faustian Echoes, a 20-minute long piece that was actually pretty solid. And considering that Agalloch's discography so far has been pretty much flawless, there's really been no reason to not go into this LP expecting the band to just churn out another fantastic album. My guest in this review, Elliot Quinn. You can find his YouTube channel down there in the description box. He is a young, bright reviewer with a wide vocabulary, hailing from the UK, who has an immense passion for metal music. For someone so young, he has a really attentive ear and loves metal music, both new and old, so I'm pretty psyched to see what he thinks about this new Agalloch record. Transition! Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, and like I said, magic of the internet. We are now here with Elliot Quinn, and we're going to be talking about the new Agalloch LP. Elliot, essentially, what were your thoughts overall on this new record?
Going into this, I didn't really know what to expect from Agalloch because each album for me is just starkly different. There's an obvious evolution, but from each album you can definitely tell them apart in sound. I thought if you were to get someone into Agalloch, this would be one of the albums I would give them. I mean, I suppose it really depends on what that person is already into. If they're into metal or something, you might want to give them Ashes Against the Grain. If they're into prog, then The Mantle is the perfect way to go. Overall, I think this is an incredibly strong Agalloch record. I mean, I prefer it to Marrow of the Spirit, which a lot of people probably disagree with. I prefer it to Ashes Against the Grain, and I currently think it's around Pale Folklore. Not as good as The Mantle yet, in my mind. It probably needs a few more listens. I find it very difficult to describe Agalloch's music. Some people say it's, neo-folk, some people say it's black metal, doom metal, progressive, and all of those are true, some more true than others. And I feel on this album they've really combined everything they've done so far into one, record, which is, great for some people. Some people maybe wanted more evolution. I think it's brilliant that they've looked back over their catalogue and really taken bits from all of them. Those are my overall thoughts on the record, but obviously I have more things to say about Serpent and the Spear.
Yeah, about some of the deeper cuts. I'm sort of, I don't want to say I'm far into the opposite, but I am not as in love with this record as you. I mean, I think it's maybe just a touch under their debut. It just lacks the instrumental diversity for me, and it lacks, in a way, some of the vocal diversity for me that I've loved on their previous LPs. And there are some moments on here where I'm not as crazy on the production, in that it's sort of like the mix is off sometimes. It's like the drums and the rhythm guitars are just overpowering in comparison to some of the lead guitars and the vocals, both of which are typically really stunning and tend to lead the way on Agalloch records, but just don't seem to be doing so on a handful of the tracks here. My favorite songs on this entire LP were the acoustic interludes, all of which I thought were really beautiful. But I thought that some of the tracks on here tended to run just a little tedious, mostly because I felt like Agalloch was sort of rehashing a lot of ideas that I've heard them run through in the past. And some of my favorite moments on here reminded me merely of just Marrow of the Spirit, not necessarily in a terrible way. There are certainly a lot of great endings to these songs with harmonized guitar solos and some interesting transitions. But to me, this is definitely not a favorite of mine from them. What tracks did you come out loving the most?
I kind of prefer it when Agalloch go down a more progressive route when their songs are longer. I mean, probably my favourite Agalloch track ever is In the Shadow of Our Pale Companion. And there are a couple of really good songs on this one. PLATEU of the Ages, which is the second last track. That was a really long, 12, 13-minute song. And I felt that just moved in so many different directions. I mean, at the beginning of the track, it kind of sounded like stuff Agalloch had done before, like I understand what you mean. And I kind of thought, you know, is there are they going to be able to fill 30 minutes with this music? But by the end of the track, it just explored everything this album was going to explore. It went further than any other track. What do you think were the stronger tracks on the album?
Well, I actually have to agree with you completely as far as my favorite track on the LP, PLATEU of the Ages, was definitely a standout in my opinion. I thought some of the melodies on that record on that song ran a little darker than some of the more triumphant tracks on the album, and that definitely made it stand out, and I thought it was one of the few moments where Agalloch actually came through and wrote a multifaceted song that just kept me engaged from beginning to end. On the opposite side, my least favorite track on here is actually the second longest track on the entire record, Birth and Death of the Pillars of Creation. To me, just the two alternating riff notes and chords that eventually glide into these acoustic guitars that just have some very mundane chords playing through them, and then to return to that riff with layered guitars on top of them, it was just a really tedious listen. It was like the band was really just sort of going through the motions, and not only was the composition of this track not that interesting, but just it wasn't that visceral either. There just wasn't any excitement to the performance. And I know Agalloch has never been one of those overly aggressive bands or anything like that, but I mean, there are plenty of songs off of Marrow of the Spirit, which you could also argue as well as their debut. You know, two of their least overtly aggressive records, but you know, still a very strong groove to some of these songs. Whereas I wasn't catching that as much with this record. It just felt a lot more reserved in a way, and not really in a way that I thought was intentional, because it's certainly a loud album, but there's just so much on here that just feels like Agalloch running out of ideas in a way, you know, not really doing anything more than we've heard them do already, you know, with these similar beats and these similar blast beats and you know, this very similar tremolo guitar layered harmonization that we hear on a lot of tracks too. And while I don't really mind any of these things in theory, you know, it's just the way Agalloch structures their music, just not as many winning melodies to me came out of the process. And you know, while I don't mind these acoustic interludes, I do like them. You know, they don't come out to me as stunning or as amazing as some of the other stuff that has worked into their records as far as interludes or just quieter, more subtle moments that involve acoustic instruments or piano.
I really do like the interludes in sound and in scope, but I feel like they kind of blur together a bit, and I understand that they're almost there to just give you a breather, give you a bit of time to kind of relax yourself for the rest of the album, when it's in the middle or when it's at the end. But I don't know, they kind of blurred together a bit too much. For me, there was quite a lot of similarities between them, which can work very well. I mean, when you listen to Baroness Yellow and Green, I saw a lot of similarities between these two albums. When they have the themes on those, you can kind of see similarities, but you can also see differences. And I feel the only issue I found with the interludes was that they kind of did begin to blur together. And another comparison to Baroness was that when I listen to Baroness, I kind of get this euphoric feeling. It's kind of more catchy, it's more straightforward, and I don't think Agalloch were going for that on this album, but it gives me a similar emotion. And again, that's why a lot of people kind of turned away from Yellow and Green when it came out, because people were expecting something darker, something heavier, something more sludgy, and then they came out with this more upbeat record, and I feel that's kind of what Agalloch have done here. Some people are going to, you know, turn against it. It's going to be a grower for a lot of people. But again, like Yellow and Green, it kind of clicked with me instantly. What did you think of the production? Because that's kind of a turning point for a lot of people. Some people love it, some seem to hate it.
Just in general on the entire record?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said earlier, I thought like the mixing just could have been handled a lot better in terms of rhythm guitars and drums just overpowering some of the tracks on this LP, whereas the guitar leads and the vocals aren't really stealing the show like they typically do on an Agalloch record. And I feel like what lyrical and what vocal diversity, not lyrical, but vocal diversity there is on this LP, it doesn't really come through because sometimes the vocals drown out a little bit. I think the record sonically is more claustrophobic than I would have liked from Agalloch. You know, while I know they have a black metal sound, and I know they're a metal band in general, I've never, and they do have doom metal influences on some of their earlier records. I've never really seen them or ever really wanted to hear them as overpowering as this record is at some points. You know, I think this record is heavier than records like The Mantle and their debut and Marrow of the Spirit. But as a result, I think it's kind of glossed over some of the details that I typically look for in an Agalloch record. You know, I mean, while it is heavier, I wouldn't say it's so heavy that it's menacing or that it's exciting or that it's really just like giving me a darker tone or anything like that. You know, I don't think this record is really a significant mood change either in the way that you sort of bring up Yellow and Green, and I like that record too, and you know, sort of understand a lot of the disconnect that people have with that LP because it is a shift in mood from red and blue. You know, I can't say that Agalloch really pushes themselves into a different sound or a different mood or really expands upon anything that they've done before on this latest LP of theirs. You know, do you feel that way?
Yeah, I kind of see your point. That's kind of what I mentioned at the beginning. I mean, when Black Sabbath put out 13, and I know that's a completely different scenario. You know, they're a legendary band, and they've just come back after 30 plus years without their lead singer. This is a band really in their prime, but when 13 came out, that pleased a lot of people because it didn't really push forward or do anything new. It kind of stuck to what they'd already done, but kind of done some new things with it. Agalloch have definitely done a lot more things than 13 ever did. But again, when I'm listening to music, I tend to look for grooves and rhythms and stuff like that. I'm not much of a lead fan, or I'm not really into vocals. You know, instrumental music, music with vocals doesn't really change my view on it too much unless they really do stand out. And I feel this does go for a more rhythmic vibe, and again, that's going to turn a lot of people away because it's not really focusing on their folk influences or their folk metal influences or anything like that. It's kind of focusing more on their doomy, their more progressive elements. And again, a lot of people aren't going to be a fan of that, but it completely works for me. You know, that shows in just how much I love this album. But it's weird because when I heard The Satanist and then people didn't like it, I was like, how do you not like this? You're a metal fan. How does this not appeal to you? But I can almost see a lot more people not enjoying this album, which is weird for me, you know, loving it so much and then also understanding why people wouldn't like it as much. I don't know how to explain it. I can see that it's a flawed record in some aspects, but it's just kind of connected with me in a way that an Agalloch album hasn't in a while. So, I don't know, a lot of people will disagree with me, but that's just completely how I feel about this album.
Yeah. No, I mean, I could definitely feel what you're saying about the progressive elements and just sort of Agalloch relying on just their volume as opposed to you know, those folk elements that we've always expected from them, and they definitely show up on this record as well. But you know, maybe they're sort of looking to drift away from that in a sense and kind of just become a more aggressive band. You know, and if that's the case, they definitely succeed from a volume perspective. So, what would you say score-wise you're feeling on this record?
Currently I'm looking at a 9. I don't know, it could drop in the future, I'm not sure. It's currently battling Behemoth the Satanist for my current album of the year. It's weird.
No, I mean, if that's how you're feeling about it, that's how you're feeling about it. And so, I mean, you know, if you're saying it's battling the Satanist right now, which is actually maybe my favorite metal record of the year so far, it's most definitely going to be in your top 10 then, you think, at the end of the year, no matter what happens?
I'm kind of holding out for bands like Opeth and Mastodon to make their way into the metal category for me. But right now, I don't see much, you know, sending it out of the top 10. You know, could be out of the top 5 by the end of the year. Just don't know, but I can't expect it going out of the top 10. Okay. What would you give it for a score?
Right now I'm feeling like maybe on just the lighter end of a 6 right now. Strong 5, light 6. Definitely wouldn't go any deeper than a 5 on this thing. Like I said earlier, you know, I think Agalloch still has their personality. They still have a lot of the elements that a fan would come to expect from them compositionally, vocally, musically. You know, so it's not like there's a massive disappointment in that regard. You know, if you've enjoyed their past records, there's still a lot to enjoy here. But if you've heard their past 4 records, is there anything here that that really pushes beyond what they've done before sonically or musically? You know, I don't think so. This is definitely a louder record, and there are some appealing tracks on here, but there's just quite a bit of material on here that I'm just very on the fence with.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to close it out like that. So, Elliot, thank you for coming on again.
It's fine. Yeah, it was a lot of fun to do this.
All right, Anthony Fantano, Elliot Quinn, Agalloch, the Serpent and the Sphere, forever.